Do you need flood insurance when buying a home on the Outer Banks? The clear answer is not every Outer Banks home requires flood insurance. And when a buyer is financing the purchase, the lender determines whether flood insurance is required as a condition of the loan based on the specific property and the applicable lending requirements. A cash buyer doesn't have lender imposing that requirement, but they still may choose to carry flood insurance after discussing the property and their options with a qualified insurance professional. That answers the basic question, but it does not tell you whether a particular property is the right choice for you. And that is where this conversation really begins. I'm Christy Bryant, a realtor with Keller Williams Outer Banks. I live here on the Outer Banks. I work real estate here full-time, and every day I help buyers and sellers navigate this unique coastal market from Corolla to Ocracoke. These are not questions that I'm researching simply because I needed a video topic. They are questions that come up in real conversations, real property searches, real listings, and real transactions. So today, let's talk about flood insurance, but also about why understanding one factor is not the same as understanding the entire property. One of my favorite calls from a buyer starts like this. Christy, I think we found the one. I love hearing that. There is a moment when buyers walk into a property and something clicks. Maybe it's the view. Maybe it's the deck. Maybe it's the kitchen or the way the home feels when they walk through the door. They begin imagining how they would use the property and what life could look like there. That excitement matters, but that is also usually the moment when my job shifts. We are no longer talking simply looking at a house. We are evaluating a major property purchase and everything that comes with owning it. I often say, you love it? Now let's learn about it. Because I do not want my clients relying on emotion or discovering important information after they have already mentally moved in. I want us asking thoughtful questions early. So let's return to the original question. No, not every home on the Outer Banks requires flood insurance. If you are financing the purchase, your lender will determine whether coverage is required based on the specific property and the terms of the loan. A lender may also require flood insurance in situations where a buyer did not initially expect it. If you were purchasing with cash, there is no lender imposing that requirement. But that doesn't automatically mean going without coverage is the right decision. That is a property-specific conversation for the buyer or owner to have with a qualified insurance professional. And that distinction is important. Your realtor should not be acting as your insurance agent. My role is not to select coverage, interpret policy exclusions, or tell a client what insurance they should purchase. My role is to help identify questions that need answers, assist my clients in gathering available property information, encourage them to consult the appropriate qualified professionals, and help coordinate the real estate transaction. That is a good part of good representation. The next question I commonly hear is, Christy, what flood zone is this house in? On the Outer Banks, buyers often hear destinations as X, AE, and BE. Those designations provide information about mapped flood risk and can affect lending, insurance, and construction considerations. But I want my buyers to understand something important. A flood zone destination is useful information, but it does not guarantee that a property will or will not experience flooding. And I would never recommend making a buying decision based only on one letter on a flood map. That letter is part of the information. It is not the entire story of the property. When I represent a buyer, I want us to look at the broader picture. What information is available about the property? What does the lender require? And what does the buyer's insurance professional explain? What does the inspection reveal? And what ownership cost should the buyer investigate? And most importantly, does this property support the buyer's goal? And that's the difference between finding a piece of information online and having someone help you apply that information to a real decision. The Outer Banks is not one uniform real estate market. A buyer may be looking at an oceanfront home in Corolla, a property in Duck or Southern Shores, a cottage in Kitty Hawk, or a home in Kill Devil Hills or Nags Head, a property at Roanoke Island, or a home further south on Hatteras Island or Ocracoke. Those properties may be oceanfront, soundfront, canal front, oceanside, or further inland. They may be as a primary residence, second home, vacation rental, or an investment property. Different properties can raise different questions. That is why I do not believe in blanket answers. The answer is rarely, this is what happens everywhere on the Outer Banks. The better answer is, let's look at this specific property, this buyer's financing, and this buyer's goals. When I say I'm local, I don't use it as a slogan. This is where I live. This is my community. And this is the market I work in full time. I am regularly walking through homes, reviewing property information, speaking with buyers and sellers, communicating with other brokers, coordinating inspections, working alongside lenders and closing attorneys, and encouraging clients to consult insurance professionals and other specialists when needed. I see the questions that arise in real transactions. I also see how different properties can require different conversations. Being local does not mean I claim to have every answer. A responsible professional knows when another qualified expert needs to be involved. The value I bring is knowing how to help organize the process, recognize the real estate questions that should be investigated, and keep my clients' goals at the center of the transaction. Buyers will sometimes say, Christy, this house is within our budget, and that is a good starting point. But the purchase price is only one number. Depending on the property, buyers may also need to investigate insurance, maintenance, HOA dues where applicable, utilities, property taxes, repairs, potential improvements, and other costs related to ownership. Flood insurance may be part of that picture. It may not. That's why I do not want buyers choosing between two properties only because the list prices are similar. I want them to understand as much as reasonably possible about owning those properties. There's a major difference between comparing purchase prices and comparing the ownership experience. A strong transaction is the one person trying to handle every issue. It's a team. It's your realtor. I have a role. Your lender has a role. Your insurance professional has a role. Your home inspector has a role. Your closing attorney has a role. And depending on the property, other qualified professionals may also be needed. I do not want to replace those professionals. I want the appropriate people involved so my clients receive information from the qualified to provide it When I represent a buyer, my role includes helping that client navigate the real estate transaction, identify questions and concerns, coordinate due diligence activities, negotiate within the scope of our agency relationship, and keep the client's goal at the center of this discussion and decisions. That is very different from simply opening a door or providing a link to a listing. If you're thinking about selling on the Outer Banks, a property here, this conversation matters to you too. Today's buyers are looking beyond the asking price and the photographs. They may be asking, what are the ownership costs? What flood information is available? What insurance questions should I investigate? And what is the condition of the property? What should I understand before making an offer? Those questions influence how buyers evaluate a home. And that is why I do not believe a listing presentation begins the day a property enters the MLS. It begins earlier. When I represent a seller, I want to understand what the sale needs to accomplish, prepare the property as its presentation, thoughtfully communicate its features accurately, anticipate the questions serious buyers may ask, and represent my client's interests throughout the transaction. Preparation doesn't mean hiding concerns or trying to control a buyer's conclusion. It means presenting the property truthfully, addressing known material facts appropriately, and preparing to answer buyer questions accurately. Good listing representation is not just putting a sign in the yard. It's understanding the property, understanding the likely buyer, and preparing for the transaction before an offer arrives. There is more real estate information available today than ever before. You can search Google, you can watch YouTube, you can ask ChatGPT, you can review maps and property portals. And I think informed consumers are a good thing. I want my clients asking questions, but information and representation are not the same. Information may explain what a flood zone is. It does not know why you are buying. It does not know what you need the property to accomplish. It does not know what you are comfortable maintaining, what your financial priorities are, or what trade-offs you are willing to make. And it is not accountable for representing your interest during a real estate transaction. That is the human side of real estate, and it's still the most important part. Why I do this real estate is it's a relationship business. That is why I love it. I get to work with people during important matters and moments in their lives. Some are excited, some are nervous. Some have planned for years to purchase property here. Others are preparing to sell a home that they have been a part of their story for a long time. And my job is not to push someone towards a transaction. It is to understand what they are trying to accomplish and help them navigate the decisions involved. Sometimes the right next step is, yes, let's move forward. Sometimes it is, we need more information. And occasionally it is, this property may not accomplish what you told me you want. That is representation. And that is the kind of relationship I want my clients. So do you need flood insurance when buying a home on the Outer Banks? Not every property requires it. When financing is involved, the lender determines whether flood insurance is required as a condition of the loan. Cash buyers do not have a lender imposing those requirements, but they should still discuss the property and their coverage options with a qualified insurance professional. But the most important takeaway is this: Do not evaluate all Outer Banks property based on one answer. Evaluate the full picture. And do not feel that you must figure everything out alone. That is what your professional team is for. If you are starting to think about having and buying a home here on the Outer Banks, and you do not need to have every detail worked out before contacting me, our first conversation can simply be about your goals, your concerns, what you're hoping to accomplish, and what you need from a real estate professional. And if you are considering selling, I would like to understand your goals too. Why are you thinking about selling? And what matters about the timing? What does the sale need to accomplish for you? And whether I'm representing a buyer or seller, I want to understand the goal before we begin talking about the transaction. I'm Christy Bryant with Keller Williams Outer Banks. I live here. I work here full time, and I serve buyers and sellers throughout the Outer Banks from Corolla to Ocracoke. If you are deciding who you want beside you, it is a time when it's time to buy or sell. I would value the opportunity to have the first conversation. And if you are not ready yet, subscribe and stay connected. I will continue answering the real questions buyers and sellers ask about Outer Banks real estate. And when the time comes that you need a realtor, I hope I have earned the opportunity to be the person you call. And thank you for spending this time with me, and I'll see you next time.